After kissing my husband's hand for what I thought was the last time, I walked down the hospital hall, barely holding myself together. As I passed the break room, I heard one nurse whisper, "She still doesn't know, does she?" The other replied, "No, and if she finds out, we're done." I froze. My heart sank, and the room where my husband had been was locked. The day Ben died, a cold dread settled over me, not just from grief, but from the hushed whispers of nurses that clawed at my gut. "She doesn't know, does she?" they murmured, as if I was some ignorant bystander in my own life. But they made a fatal miscalculation. A locked hospital room, my husband's missing phone, a text message sent after he was declared gone. These weren't coincidences. There were breadcrumbs leading to a truth so dark, so shattering, it would redefine everything I thought I knew about the man I loved. Grief makes most widows retreat. For me, it made me dangerous. My fingers trembled as I reached for Ben's hand. Cold. Too cold. The steady, rhythmic beep of the hospital room had fallen silent hours ago, replaced by the hushed, almost reverent voices of nurses and the soft squeak of shoes on linoleum. The doctor, his voice gentle, broke the quiet. "It's time, Mrs. Parker. You can say your goodbyes now." I just nodded, a hollow ache in my chest making words impossible. Just 3 days earlier, Ben had kissed me goodbye, complaining about a headache. By lunchtime, he was in the ER. By evening, in a coma. And now, at 35, he was gone. A massive stroke. It felt impossible. Unthinkable. "Can we have a moment alone?" I managed, my voice barely a whisper. The room cleared, and I sank onto the chair beside his bed, studying his face. The faint lines around his eyes that crinkled when he laughed. The small scar above his eyebrow, a relic from a childhood fall. His dark hair, always a little messy, just as it had been that morning. "Ben," I whispered, the sound catching in my throat. "I don't know how to do this without you." I brushed my thumb across his knuckles, a wave of memories washing over me. Those hands holding mine through college graduation, our wedding, the excitement of buying our first house. "I love you. I've always loved you." I leaned down and pressed my lips to his forehead. It was so cold. When I finally stood, my legs threatened to give way. "Melissa," the nurse whose badge I vaguely registered, stepped forward. "Take your time, Mrs. Parker." I nodded, clutching my purse, my body moving mechanically. "Thank you for everything you all did." My mind, however, was trapped in a thick, suffocating fog of disbelief. My Ben, gone. It simply couldn't be. As I stepped into the corridor, 2 nurses stood huddled near their station, heads bent, deep in conversation. I probably wouldn't have noticed them at all if they hadn't suddenly gone silent as I approached. Then one whispered, her voice barely audible, "She still doesn't know, does she?" The other, her voice tight with tension, replied, "No. And if she finds out, we're finished." I froze, mid-step. They hadn't seen me yet. Asterisk, what didn't I know? What were they hiding? Asterisk, they looked up then, their eyes widening in shock when they spotted me. In an instant, they scattered. One became intensely interested in a patient chart. The other hurried down the hall as if summoned. I turned back towards Ben's room, but the door was already closed. A sign hung on it, cleaning in progress. No entry. 2 orderlies stood outside, their expressions neutral, their posture rigid. A third nurse, Tanya, approached me, her hand gentle on my elbow. "Mrs. Parker, you should go home. You've been through enough." There was kindness in her voice, but something else too. Urgency. A clear desire to usher me away. "Can I see his chart?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. I want to know what his last hours were like. If he was in pain. If he woke up at all while I wasn't here." Tanya's smile tightened. "You'll have to wait until morning. There's been a delay in documentation. Hospital protocol." Was he conscious at all before he passed? I pressed, a sudden, desperate need for answers bubbling up inside me. "No, Mrs. Parker." He wasn't responsive after admission. Her eyes slid away from mine. He wouldn't have known. I nodded, trying to accept her words, but something felt profoundly wrong, like walking into your own home and sensing something has been moved, but not knowing what. "Emma." I turned to see Julia, Ben's sister, rushing down the hall. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. I came as soon as I could, she sobbed, pulling me into a tight hug. I can't believe he's gone. Julia had always been the emotional opposite of Ben. Where he was reserved, she was expressive. Where he planned, she improvised. They'd grown apart in recent years, speaking only on holidays and birthdays. It happened so fast, I said, my voice hollow. Julia pulled back, confusion clouding her face. But that doesn't make sense. He texted me this morning at 6 a.m. He sounded fine. He said he was feeling better and the doctors might release him soon. Tanya, who still stood nearby, stepped closer. Her face had gone pale. That's impossible. Mr. Parker was declared brain dead at 5:04 a.m. Julia pulled out her phone, scrolling rapidly through messages. Look, she said, holding it out. 6:07 a.m. Feeling better. Doc says might go home soon. Tell Emma not to worry. I stared at the screen, at the message from my supposedly brain-dead husband. Tanya's face was ashen. There must be some mistake, she insisted. Maybe the timestamp is wrong. Or what? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm gathering inside me. Mrs. Parker, you've been through a terrible ordeal. Grief can make us look for answers, for something to make sense of a senseless event. But sometimes things just happen. Her voice sounded rehearsed, like she'd said these words many times before. I need to go, I whispered, backing away. I'll drive you, Julia offered, but I shook my head. I need to be alone. The drive home was a blur. My mind kept returning to those whispered words. Asterisk, she still doesn't know. If she finds out, we're finished. Asterisk, and then the text to Julia, sent after Ben was supposedly already gone. Our house, asterisk my asterisk house now, was dark and silent when I arrived. I didn't bother turning on lights as I made my way to our bedroom. Everything was exactly as we'd left it 3 days ago. Ben's watch on the nightstand, his book face down on his side of the bed, his pajama pants tossed over the chair. I collapsed onto the bed, curling around his pillow. It still smelled like him. I pulled his wedding ring from my pocket. They'd given it to me in a small plastic bag along with his wallet. Why does this feel wrong? I whispered into the darkness. What weren't they telling me, Ben? The silence offered no answers. Morning came in fragments. Patches of sunlight on the floor, the distant sound of the neighbor's dog, a car door slamming. I hadn't slept, not really. Just drifted in and out of a daze where Ben was still alive in one moment and gone the next. I pushed myself upright, my body aching from the awkward position I'd maintained. All night, the bedside clock read 9:47 a.m. In normal times, I'd have been at school, teaching my fourth graders about fractions or state capitals. Normal times, when Ben was alive, I forced myself to stand, to move. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. Dark circles under red eyes, pale skin. I looked like someone I didn't recognize. Ben's hospital bag sat untouched by the front door where I dropped it. I knelt beside it now, unzipping it slowly. His clothes were inside, neatly folded by someone at the hospital. The jeans and button-down shirt he'd been wearing when the stroke hit. His belt, his socks. But his phone wasn't there. Neither was his smartwatch. I frowned, trying to remember if I'd seen them at the hospital. I'd packed this bag myself when they admitted him, gathering his personal items while the doctors worked. I distinctly remembered putting both the phone and watch inside. I called the hospital, navigating the automated system until I reached someone in patient services. I'd like to request my husband's medical records, I said after explaining who I was. Ben Parker. He passed away yesterday morning. I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Parker. We can certainly process that request. It typically takes 5 to 10 business days for medical records to be released. 5 to 10 days? I repeated, my voice tight. That seems long. There's an internal review process for all deceased patient records, the woman explained, her tone professional but distant. It's standard procedure. Something about her answer bothered me, but I couldn't pinpoint why. I also can't find some of my husband's personal items, his phone and smartwatch. They weren't in his bag. Let me check our system. I heard keyboard clicks in the background. I don't see any electronics listed in our inventory of Mr. Parker's belongings. Everything we had was returned to you. but I'm certain they were in his bag. I put them there myself. I understand your concern, Mrs. Parker, but our records indicate all personal items were returned. If you'd like to file a formal complaint— No, I said quickly. That's fine. Thank you. I hung up, that sense of wrongness intensifying. Where were Ben's devices? And why would his medical records need such a lengthy internal review? My phone rang, startling me. An unknown number. Hello, Mrs. Parker. A woman's voice, hushed and urgent. This is Tanya from the hospital. The nurse from yesterday. Yes. I shouldn't be calling you. I could lose my job. Her voice shook slightly. But I saw something in your husband's chart. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. My heart began to race. What? He was awake, Mrs. Parker. Yesterday morning before she paused. He asked for you, specifically. He was agitated, trying to tell the staff something. Why wouldn't they tell me this? Why? I have to go. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands trembling. Ben had been conscious. He had asked for me, and no one had told me. I needed to make sense of this, to organize the scattered fragments of information that were beginning to feel less like coincidence and more like something deliberate. I found a notebook in Ben's desk drawer. On the first blank page, I wrote, "What happened to Ben?" Underneath, I listed what I knew. Stroke on Tuesday. Declared brain dead. Thursday, 5:04 a.m. Text to Julia. Thursday, 6:07 a.m. Nurses whispering about something I didn't know. Ben's missing phone and watch. Ben was conscious and asking for me. The facts stared back at me, disconnected but somehow linked. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Can we talk? Something doesn't feel right about this. We met at a coffee shop downtown an hour later. Julia looked as sleep-deprived as I felt. Ben called me Tuesday night, she said, stirring her untouched coffee. After they admitted him. He sounded scared, Emma. Not about the stroke, about something else. He said he had something important to tell you. That he'd messed up. Messed up how? He wouldn't say. Just that he needed to make things right. I frowned. That doesn't sound like Ben. I know, Julia leaned forward. Which makes me think it was really important. After coffee, I drove to our bank. I needed to start sorting out our accounts, beginning the grim process of untangling our finances. The banker was sympathetic, guiding me through the steps with practiced gentleness. You'll want to print out recent statements, she advised, for taxes and estate purposes. I nodded, grateful for the clear instructions. When she printed our credit card statement from the past month, I scanned it automatically and froze. There were charges I didn't recognize, small ones mostly. A gas station across town, a restaurant I'd never heard of. But one stood out. Peterson's Jewelry, $3,850, just 2 days before Ben's stroke. Is something wrong? The banker asked, her brow furrowed. No, I said quickly, trying to keep track of everything. I left the bank with the statement folded in my purse, my mind racing. Ben and I shared everything. We consulted each other before any purchase over $100. It was one of our first agreements as newlyweds. What had he bought for nearly $4,000 without telling me? Peterson's Jewelry was downtown, a small, elegant shop with a green awning. I'd walked past it many times but never been inside. The bell above the door chimed softly as I entered. A middle-aged man with glasses looked up from behind the counter. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I approached, suddenly uncertain. My husband made a purchase here recently. Tuesday. Ben Parker. Recognition flickered in the man's eyes. Yes, of course. He picked up a custom piece. He smiled. A beautiful choice. Can you tell me what it was? A ring. White gold with a sapphire center stone. He said it was a surprise for someone named Sophie. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Sophie. I'd never heard that name from Ben. Are you all right, ma'am? Fine, I managed. Did he say anything else about this? Sophie. The jeweler hesitated. Only that it was important to get it right, that she'd been waiting a long time. I thanked him and left, my mind spinning. Ben had bought another woman an expensive ring. He had kept it secret. He had told Julia he'd messed up. The The pieces were falling into a pattern I didn't want to see. At home, I sat at Ben's desk, staring at his laptop. We knew each other's passwords. Another thing we'd agreed on early in our marriage: no secrets. Except, apparently there had been secrets. I opened his email, typed in his password. Access denied. He'd changed it. I tried variations of his usual password. Nothing worked. Finally, I clicked forgot password and had a reset link sent to his recovery email, which forwarded to my phone. The screen loaded and Ben's inbox appeared. Hundreds of emails, mostly work-related, but at the top, unread, sent yesterday morning from Sophie Allen. Subject: You didn't tell her, did you? My finger hovered over the email. Fear and anger battled within me. I clicked. The email opened, revealing not just one message, but an entire thread spanning months. 8 months, to be exact. I scrolled. To the beginning, my heart pounding in my ears. Ben, I know we agreed to keep our distance, but Claire asked about you again yesterday. She's starting to ask questions I don't know how to answer. Sophie. I kept reading. Message after message. I was unfolding a story I knew nothing about. Ben's replies were careful, measured. I'm trying to figure out the right time, Sophie. Emma deserves to know, but I need to do this right. This wasn't what I had expected. These emails didn't read like love letters. They were heavy with obligation, with shared burdens. And then I saw it, a name that appeared again and again. Claire. Claire lost another tooth. Claire's teacher says she's reading above grade level. Claire wants to know why her daddy doesn't live with us. Her daddy, Ben. A photo attachment caught my eye. Dated 3 months ago. I clicked it open, and the world stopped. Ben, smiling broadly, was kneeling beside a little girl at a playground. She had his eyes, his dimple when she smiled. The caption read simply, "First day at the park with Daddy." The laptop slid from my trembling hands onto the desk. Ben had a child, a daughter, and he had hidden her existence from me for our entire marriage. No, I reached for my phone, dialing Julia's number without thinking. Emma, what's wrong? Her voice was instantly alert. Did you know? I demanded, surprised by the anger in my voice. About Ben's daughter? Silence stretched between us. Then, quietly, what daughter? Claire. He has a daughter with a woman named Sophie. He's been seeing them, spending time with them. My voice cracked. Buying them jewelry. Oh my God, Julia breathed. That's what he meant. What? Last Christmas at your house. I overheard him on the phone in the backyard. He said, if Emma ever finds out, she'll leave me. I thought maybe he'd lost money or something. But this. I hung up without saying goodbye. I needed to see her. This Sophie. This woman who had shared a secret life with my husband. Finding her wasn't difficult. Sophie Allen was on Facebook. Her profile semi-public. She was pretty in an understated way. Chestnut hair, kind eyes, nothing like me. Her profile listed her as a single mom to 6-year-old Claire. Elementary school teacher. Lives in Westfield. Just 20 minutes from my house. 6 years old. Which meant Ben had known her before we were married. Had gotten her pregnant. Then left her to marry me. No, that wasn't the Ben I knew. The timeline didn't make sense. I drove to Westfield that afternoon. Sophie's address from a property records search entered into my GPS. Her house was small but well kept, with a bicycle on the front lawn and chalk drawings on the driveway. I parked across the street, not sure what I planned to do. Confront her? Demand answers? Ask to see the child my husband had kept secret? As I sat there, the front door opened. A woman, Sophie, stepped onto the porch. She called something over her shoulder, and then a little girl burst through the doorway, her backpack bouncing as she ran to her mother. Claire, Ben's daughter. The resemblance was unmistakable now that I saw her in motion. The way she tilted her head when she laughed. The animated gestures as she spoke. Before I could think better of it, I was out of the car and crossing the street. Sophie noticed me approaching, her smile fading as she pulled Claire closer to her side. Can I help you? She asked, a weariness in her voice. I'm Emma, I said. Emma Parker, Ben's wife. Recognition dawned in her eyes, followed by a complex emotion I couldn't name. Not guilt, not fear. Something like resignation. Claire, honey, go inside and start your homework. I'll be in soon. The little girl looked at me curiously before nodding and disappearing into the house. Sophie crossed her arms. I wondered if you'd come. I'm sorry about Ben. Truly. Did you know he was dying? Is that what the ring was for? She frowned. What ring? The sapphire ring. He bought it for you 2 days before his stroke. Sophie shook her head. He didn't buy me any ring. We weren't. It wasn't like that between us, Emma. Then what was it like? I demanded, fighting to keep my voice steady. She sighed. Can we sit, please? We settled on her porch steps, a careful distance between us. Ben and I dated briefly years ago, she began, before he met you. It didn't work out, and we went our separate ways. I didn't know I was pregnant until after you two were already engaged. And you didn't tell him? I tried once, but he was so happy with you, planning your wedding. She looked down at her hands. I decided to do it on my own. But he found out. She nodded. 3 years ago, Claire had a medical emergency, a severe allergic reaction. The hospital needed family medical history. I called him in desperation. She paused. He came right away, and after that he wanted to be in her life. Behind my back, I said, the hurt raw in my voice. He was going to tell you many times, but he was scared. Scared that you'd leave him, that you wouldn't understand. Sophie looked at me directly. At first, yes, but later it was more complicated. She hesitated. Ben wasn't hiding Claire out of shame, Emma. He was scared. Someone else didn't want her to exist. What does that mean? But Sophie was already standing. I've said too much. Claire and we've already lost Ben. We can't afford to lose anything else. She went inside, leaving me alone with questions that only multiplied. I drove home in a daze, Sophie's words echoing in my mind. Someone else didn't want her to exist. What did that mean? Who would care about Ben having a child from a previous relationship? At home, I pulled open the bottom drawer of Ben's desk where he kept old journals and notebooks. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, only that I needed to understand who my husband really was. Near the back, I found a worn leather travel journal from 3 years ago, around the time Sophie said Ben had discovered Claire's existence. I flipped through pages of mundane work notes until an entry caught my eye. April 18th. Saw her again today. Same man watching from the car. I think I've made things worse by going back. Need to be more careful. He hadn't named names, but the timing aligned with when he would have started visiting Claire. I continued reading, finding scattered entries that now took on new meaning. May 2nd. Meeting with and about the arrangement. Don't trust him. But what choice do I have? June 15th. Transfer complete. This has to work. Too much at stake now. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. This is Sophie. That black SUV is back. The same one Ben warned me about. I'm scared. I called her immediately. What SUV? Who's watching you? I don't know, she said, her voice hushed. Ben noticed it a month ago. Someone parked outside my house or Claire's school. He confronted the driver once, but the man denied following us. Did Ben say who he thought it was? He mentioned something about the health fund he was working with. Said someone there was too invested. I didn't understand what he meant. Health fund. Ben worked in finance, specializing in healthcare investments. He'd mentioned a special project over the past year. Something about a private medical research foundation. I'd assumed it was just extra work. Sophie, what school does Claire attend? Briarwood Elementary. Why? I opened my laptop, searching for Briarwood. It was a private school with prominently displayed logos of its benefactors at the bottom of the website. Among them, Westlake Health Innovation Fund, where Ben had been consulting. The connection hit me like a physical blow. Ben hadn't just been visiting his secret daughter. He'd been funneling money to her school through his work with a health fund. But why would that put them in danger? The next morning, I drove to the Westlake Health Innovation Fund offices. The building was sleek and modern, with tinted windows and a minimalist lobby. I approached the reception desk with forced confidence. Good morning. I'm Lisa Parker, Ben Parker's assistant. I need to collect some files from his office. The receptionist frowned. I wasn't aware Mr. Parker had an assistant. I work remotely usually, but since his passing, I've been asked to gather his materials. I smiled, hoping she couldn't hear my pounding heart. I'll need to call upstairs for approval. While she dialed, I glanced around the lobby. Security cameras in every corner. Visitor badges with QR codes assigned by the elevator. All visitors must sign confidentiality agreements before proceeding beyond reception. This wasn't just tight security. This was paranoia. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said, hanging up. "Someone will be down to speak with you." Minutes later, the elevator doors opened. A man in an impeccable suit approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "I'm Nathan Wells, Chief Security Officer," he said, extending his hand. "You must be confused. Ben Parker didn't have an assistant." I felt my face flush. "I'm not his assistant. I'm his wife, Emma Parker." Nathan's expression shifted subtly. "Mrs. Parker, my condolences for your loss, but I'm afraid I can't allow you access to Mr. Parker's workspace. His contract included strict confidentiality provisions that survive his death." "What was he working on here?" I asked directly. "I'm not at liberty to discuss that, but legally, you're no longer involved with any of it." His tone softened artificially. "Ben's personal effects from his desk have already been packed up. I can have them sent to you." "That would be appreciated," I said, swallowing my frustration. As I turned to leave, Nathan added, "Mrs. Parker, Ben was a valuable member of our team. His dedication to certain projects will be hard to replace." The way he emphasized dedication sent a chill through me. Back in my car, I called Sophie again. "What medical condition does Claire have?" "Why?" Her voice was instantly guarded. "Please, Sophie, it's important." She hesitated. "She has Kaplan-Mercer syndrome. It's rare, a genetic disorder that affects her immune system and development." "Why are you asking about this Kaplan-Mercer syndrome? The health fund Ben worked with. Did they ever reach out to you about Claire?" "Once. About 2 years ago. They wanted to enroll her in some clinical study. I refused. It felt too experimental, too risky. The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture I could barely comprehend. Ben's secretive behavior, the money trail, his fear. My phone rang. An unknown number again. "Mrs. Parker, this is Thomas Grayson. I was your husband's attorney." I frowned. "Ben and I shared a lawyer for our wills and house purchase." "I don't understand." "Our attorney is Richard Simmons. I was retained by your husband privately approximately 2 years ago. He left specific instructions that in the event of his death, I was to contact you after a brief waiting period." My grip tightened on the phone. "What instructions?" "He left an envelope for you. He was quite explicit that it should be delivered in person and only to you." I met Thomas Grayson at his office an hour later. He was older than I expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Ben came to me in a state of considerable distress," he explained, retrieving a sealed envelope from his desk safe. He wouldn't specify what troubled him, only that he needed to ensure certain information would reach you if something happened to him. The envelope was heavy in my hands. My name was written on it in Ben's familiar handwriting. "Did he seem afraid?" I asked. Thomas considered this. Not afraid, exactly. Determined, like a man making contingency plans he hoped never to use. I thanked him and returned to my car before opening the envelope. Inside was a key, a hand-drawn map that appeared to show part of the hospital, and a note. "Asterisk, Emma, if you're reading this, then I waited too long to tell you. I'm sorry. For everything." The key opens locker 224 in the hospital's East Wing staff area. What you find there will explain better than I ever could. I love you. Always have, always will. Ben. Asterisk, I drove straight to the hospital. Ben's map guiding me to a staff-only storage area in the East Wing. Using a service elevator, as he'd indicated, I avoided the main areas where I might be recognized. Locker 224 was at the end of a quiet corridor. The key slid in perfectly. Inside were files, USB drives, and a handwritten letter on top. Asterisk, Emma. They didn't want her to live. I fought it. I did everything I could. The fund isn't what it seems. They're using children like Claire for something beyond medical research. When I found out, I tried to pull her out safely. They threatened me. Threatened Sophie. Said they'd withdraw all treatment if I exposed them. I had to play along. Had to keep you in the dark to protect you. If you're reading this, something's gone wrong. Get these files to Dr. Rachel Hansen at the State Medical Board. She's the only one I trust. Forgive me, Ben. Asterisk, I sank to the floor. The files scattered around me as grief and rage collided in my chest. The nurse's whispered words now made horrifying sense. Asterisk, she still doesn't know, does she? No. And if she finds out, we're finished. Asterisk, they weren't talking about an affair. They were talking about whatever had really happened to Ben. Whatever he had discovered that had cost him his life. In that sterile hospital hallway, surrounded by my husband's desperate final message, I made a promise. I would uncover every secret Ben had died protecting, no matter what it cost me. I spent the night reading every document in Ben's locker. My eyes burned, and my head throbbed, but I couldn't stop. Each page revealed another layer of a nightmare I could barely comprehend. Ben's letter was only the beginning. He'd kept meticulous records of everything. Emails, meeting notes, recorded phone conversations. The full truth was laid out in his careful handwriting, each detail more shocking than the last. Claire had been diagnosed with Kaplan-Mercer syndrome at age 3. It was rare, potentially fatal, with no FDA-approved treatments. Sophie had struggled to find specialists who even recognized the condition, let alone knew how to treat it. Then, Westlake Health Innovation Fund had reached out, seemingly by coincidence. They were running a clinical trial for a new treatment. They said Claire would be perfect. Sophie had refused, uncomfortable with the experimental protocol and the mountains of non-disclosure agreements they'd pushed at her. That's when Ben stepped in. Unknown to Sophie, he'd used his connections at work to enroll Claire in the study under modified paperwork. He forged Sophie's signature, falsified addresses, created an entire fictional backstory for how Claire came to the program. And it had worked. Claire had started receiving treatments. Her condition had improved dramatically. But 6 months in, Ben discovered something that changed everything. The fund wasn't just studying these children. They were using them, testing boundary-pushing treatments that hadn't gone through proper channels. The children showing the most promise were being groomed for something called Phase 3, details of which Ben had been unable to uncover. When he tried to withdraw Claire from the program, they threatened to expose his fraud. Worse, they said they'd ensure Claire never received medical treatment anywhere again. They had the connections to make it happen. So, Ben had made a devil's bargain. Silence in exchange for Claire's continued treatment. He'd become an unwilling accomplice, funneling money through legitimate-looking channels, helping them recruit other desperate families, all while keeping everything from me. The sun was rising as I finished reading, casting long shadows across our living room floor. I felt hollow scraped out. The husband I thought I knew had been living a double life, not of infidelity, but of desperate choices and moral compromise. I called Sophie. I know everything, I said when she answered. About Claire's condition. About what Ben did to get her into the program. Silence stretched between us. He told you? He left documents, letters, everything. I paused. Did you know what he did? That he enrolled her without your consent. I found out last month, she said, her voice tight. I was furious. I threatened to go public to report him and the fund. He begged me to wait. Said he was gathering evidence, building case. He just needed time. Time he didn't get. The ring, I said suddenly. The sapphire ring he bought. It wasn't for you, was it? No, Sophie said softly. It was for Claire, her birthstone. He wanted to give her something permanent, something that would last. She didn't finish the sentence. We both knew why, in case he wasn't around. We need to talk in person, I said. This isn't over. I met Sophie at a park the next day. Claire was at school, the school Ben had helped fund, I now realized. We sat on a bench, watching other children play, as we spoke in low voices. How is she? I asked. Better than she's been in years, Sophie admitted. The treatments, whatever they are, they're working. Her immune system is actually functioning. She's growing normally. She can run and play like other kids. At what cost? Sophie looked at me sharply. What would you have done? Let her suffer endlessly. That's not what I meant, I said. Ben believed they're using these children for something beyond treatment, something dangerous. Then why didn't he stop it? Because he was trapped, I said. They had leverage over him, and he was afraid for Claire. Sophie stared at the playground where a little girl was climbing the monkey bars, her face set in determination. Claire doesn't know any of this. She just knows that she feels better and that her voice caught, that her dad visited sometimes and brought her presents. Do you have copies of any paperwork from the fund? Anything you signed initially? Just the rejection letter I sent when I refused to enroll her. Why? Because I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. After meeting Sophie, I drove to Children's Medical Center. Dr. Rosenthal, according to Ben's notes, was Claire's primary physician and the liaison between the families and the fund. I checked the directory in the lobby and found his office on the 4th floor. Outside his door, I hesitated, then knocked. "Come in," called a voice. Dr. Rosenthal was younger than I expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a weariness that suggested long hours. His office walls were covered with children's drawings. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm Emma Parker," I said. "Ben Parker's wife." Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed immediately by caution. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Parker. How can I assist you today?" "I'd like to talk about Claire Allen." His expression didn't change, but his hands stilled on the desk. "I'm afraid I can't discuss patients with non-family members." "I know about the Westlake program," I said. "I know Ben helped get Claire enrolled without proper consent, and I know the fund is doing something that goes beyond standard treatment protocols." Dr. Rosenthal glanced at his closed door, then back at me. "Mrs. Parker, I understand you're grieving, but these are serious allegations." "They're not allegations. They're facts. Facts that Ben documented extensively before his death." He was silent for a long moment. "What exactly do you want from me?" "The truth. Is Claire in danger?" He sighed heavily. "Sometimes helping someone means coloring outside the lines, Mrs. Parker. The treatments these children receive aren't approved through conventional channels because the conventional channels move too slowly for kids like Claire. So you falsify records, coerce families, threaten people who try to speak out?" "I treat my patients," he said firmly. "What the fund does with their data, how they secure their funding, that's beyond my control." "Is it? Or do you just look the other way because the results justify the means?" He stood abruptly. "I think you should leave, Mrs. Parker. I have patients waiting." "One more question," I said, remaining seated. "What is Phase 3? Dr. Rosenthal's face paled slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." But I could see in his eyes that he did, and it frightened him. I left the hospital and drove directly to Claire's school. I parked across the street, watching as children poured out at dismissal time. Claire was easy to spot. Ben's eyes, Ben's smile as she ran to where Sophie waited. She looked healthy, happy. Whatever was happening with the fund, whatever moral lines had been crossed, the treatment was working. Was it worth it? The deception, the compromise, the fear? As I watched Claire climb into Sophie's car, laughing at something her mother said, I could understand why Ben had thought so. But the cost was rising. 2 days later, Sophie called in a panic. "They've dropped Claire from the program," she said, her voice shaking. "Someone leaked information about unauthorized participants, and they're doing an internal audit. Claire's been removed from treatment, effective immediately." My stomach dropped. What did they say? Just that there were irregularities in our paperwork that needed to be addressed. That Claire's participation is suspended indefinitely. She took a shuddering breath. "Emma, without those treatments, her condition could regress. Everything she's gained could be lost." I thought of Ben's desperate note. Asterisk, they didn't want her to live. I fought it. I did everything I could. Asterisk, what if exposing the truth meant Claire would suffer? Was justice worth a child's health, her life? "I'll call you back," I said. That night, I sat at Ben's desk, surrounded by his files, torn between two impossible choices. Expose the fund's unethical practices and risk Claire's health, or stay silent and let them continue using vulnerable children for whatever Phase 3 entailed. Ben hadn't found a way out of this maze. Had his death been a result of trying? My phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello, Mrs. Parker. My name is Travis Harmon. I was a colleague of your husband's. We need to talk." We met at a diner off the highway, a place unlikely to be frequented by anyone connected to Westlake. Travis Harmon was in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. I worked with Ben on the initial Westlake partnership, he explained, his coffee untouched. I was the whistleblower who exposed their previous fund's tactics 3 years ago. Previous fund? Travis nodded grimly. They've operated under different names. Westlake is just the latest iteration. They find a legitimate medical need, rare diseases with no established treatments, and use it as a shield for their real operations. Which are what exactly? He glanced around before continuing in a lower voice. Developing biological enhancements that go far beyond treating disease. Military applications mostly, but they need human subjects, and children are ideal. Their systems are more adaptable. That's monstrous, I whispered. It is, and nearly impossible to prove because they hide behind layers of legitimate research. The treatments work. The children do get better, so families don't ask questions. Ben tried to expose them. Travis's expression softened. Ben was caught in the middle. He discovered what was happening after Claire was already enrolled. They had him cornered. Expose them and lose Claire's treatment, or help them and keep her alive. He paused. He chose a third option. He began gathering evidence, building a case that would be too strong to ignore. And they found out. He nodded. I believe so. Ben contacted me the night before his stroke. Said he had everything we needed to shut them down for good. I thought of Ben's missing phone and watch. They took his devices from the hospital. His evidence. Not all of it, Travis said. Ben was smarter than that. He kept backups. That's what I need your help to find. For the next week, Travis and I worked methodically through everything Ben had left behind. The files from the locker, his home office, every digital account we could access. We built a timeline of events, cross-referencing each piece of evidence. Sophie joined our efforts, bringing every document she had related to Claire's condition and treatment. Her initial hesitation had hardened into determination. I want to do this the right way, she said, or we keep running forever. We were making progress when Travis received a troubling phone call. That was my contact at the medical licensing board, he said, hanging up. Someone's been asking questions about Claire's case. Specifically who? They wouldn't say, but shortly after, Claire's doctor received an official notice questioning her treatment history. That evening, Sophie called in a panic. There's a black SUV parked outside my house again, she said, her voice shaking. They've been there for hours. I drove to her house immediately. By the time I arrived, the SUV was gone, but Sophie remained shaken. Claire keeps asking when she'll get her medicine again, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know what to tell her. We're close, I promised. We just need a little more time. The next day, a local reporter named Rita Mendoza reached out to me. She'd been investigating Westlake for months after receiving anonymous tips about irregularities in their clinical trials. I heard whispers about a patient named Claire, she explained when we met in a coffee shop far from the hospital, and about a financial analyst who was asking too many questions. My husband, I said. She nodded. I'd like to help, but I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. I shared a carefully selected portion of what we'd discovered, enough to give her context without compromising our evidence or putting Claire at risk. This is bigger than I thought, Rita said, and more dangerous. Are you sure you want to pursue this? I don't have a choice, I said. Neither does Claire. That night, I returned home to find a letter from my school district. My teaching position was being reviewed due to financial irregularities in my classroom expense reports. Reports that had never been questioned before. They were coming after me now. The next day, Travis obtained something invaluable, an audio recording from an anonymous source inside Westlake. Ben's voice was unmistakable, arguing with a man identified only as director. You can't pull her from the program, Ben said, his voice tense. She needs these treatments. Then sign the Phase 3 authorization, the director replied coldly. It's a simple choice, Parker. You either sign this or she dies off the program. You choose. You're asking me to consent to something without telling me what it is. We're asking you to trust the process that's kept Claire alive for 2 years. Your choice. The recording ended there. Travis looked grim. This is what we needed. Proof of coercion. It's not enough, I said. We need to know what Phase 3 actually is. With Rita's help, We scheduled an emergency court hearing. The judge, a stern woman named Eleanor Winters, agreed to see us privately given the sensitive nature of the case and the potential risk to a minor. We'll push for Claire's immediate reinstatement and treatment, Travis explained as we prepared. But we'll also present evidence of the fund's coercive practices and demand an independent investigation. The night before the hearing, Sophie called, her voice shaking. "Someone slashed my tires," she said. "All four. And they left a note on my door." "What did it say?" "She's not worth it. Neither are you." I felt cold rage building in my chest. "Stay with a friend tonight. Don't tell anyone where you're going. We'll pick you up in the morning." As I hung up, I realized I was no longer afraid. These people had taken my husband. They'd threatened a child. They tried to intimidate us into silence. But silence wasn't an option anymore. The courthouse was quiet when we arrived, our hearing scheduled before regular sessions began. Travis had arranged for a private entrance to avoid attention. The judge's chambers were wood-paneled and austere. Judge Winters watched impassively as we took our seats. Across from us sat 3 men in expensive suits, Westlake's legal team, led by a sharp-eyed woman named Diane Marshall. "This is highly irregular," Marshall began. "An emergency hearing based on speculative claims. I've reviewed the initial evidence, Counselor," Judge Winters interrupted, "and I find sufficient cause for concern. Proceed." Travis presented our case methodically, walking the judge through the documentation, Ben's records, the forged consent forms, payment trails showing how money flowed through shell companies, and finally, the audio recording of Ben being threatened. "What we have here, Your Honor," Travis concluded, "is a systematic pattern of exploitation. Vulnerable families with children suffering from rare diseases are targeted, coerced, and then trapped in a program that goes far beyond ethical medical research." "These are serious allegations," Judge Winters said. "What does the fund have to say?" Marshall stood. "Your Honor, Westlake Health Innovation Fund operates under strict FDA oversight. Our clinical trials have saved countless lives, including Claire Allen's. Yes, there are confidentiality requirements. Yes, we protect our intellectual property. But the suggestion that we're conducting some kind of sinister experiment is absurd." "Then explain Phase 3. I said, unable to stay silent. Marshall's eyes flickered to me. Phase 3 is standard terminology in clinical trials. It simply refers to the final testing phase before FDA approval. "Then why won't you tell the families what it involves?" Travis countered. "Proprietary information," Marshall replied smoothly. "But I assure you, it's both safe and effective." Sophie took the stand next, nervous but determined. She explained how she'd initially refused to enroll Claire, how she'd later discovered Ben had forged her consent, and how Claire had been abruptly removed from treatment when questions arose. "Has Claire benefited from these treatments?" Judge Winters asked. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, dramatically. She was so sick before. Now she's like any other child her age." "Yet you're here, opposing the fund. Why?" "Because I want her treatment to continue. But I want to know what they're really doing to my daughter. I want transparency. I want a choice." Marshall's cross-examination was brutal, attempting to paint Sophie as an unfit mother who had neglected Claire's care until Ben stepped in. "Isn't it true that you refused proven treatment for your daughter's condition?" she demanded. "I refused experimental treatment without proper information," Sophie corrected, her voice steady. "And now that your daughter has been helped, now that she's thriving, you want to destroy the very organization that saved her." "I want to protect her," Sophie said simply, "from whatever you're not telling us about Phase 3. When my turn came, I took a deep breath and approached the stand. I explained how I discovered Ben's secret, the files he'd left behind, and the nurse's whispered conversation on the day he died. "Mr. Parker died of a stroke," Marshall interrupted. "A tragic but natural event unrelated to his work with Westlake." "Then why was his room locked immediately after? Why were his personal effects tampered with? Why did a nurse call to tell me he had been conscious and asking for me, a fact the hospital denied?" I read from Ben's letter. They didn't want her to live. I fought it. I did everything I could. The courtroom fell silent. "You've presented a compelling narrative, Mrs. Parker," Marshall said finally. "But it's just that, a narrative constructed by a grieving widow desperate to find meaning in her husband's death. I looked directly at her, then explained why Ben's text was sent after he was declared brain dead. Before Marshall could respond, the courtroom door opened. Tanya, the nurse who had called me, slipped in quietly and took a seat in the back. Travis noticed her immediately. "Your Honor, we have an additional witness." Tanya approached the stand, her hands clasped tightly together. "My name is Tanya Williams. I was the attending nurse when Ben Parker died." She looked at me, or when he was supposed to have died. A murmur ran through the room. "What do you mean, supposed to have died?" Judge Winters asked. "Mr. Parker suffered a stroke, yes, but he had regained consciousness early that morning. He was agitated, insisting on speaking to his wife. He kept saying something about evidence, about children being in danger." She took a shaky breath. "Then Dr. Harrison arrived. He's not even an ICU doctor. He ordered everyone out, said he needed to perform an assessment. When we were allowed back in, Mr. Parker was gone." "Are you suggesting foul play, Miss Williams?" Judge Winters asked sharply. "I'm stating what I saw, Your Honor." Several of us raised concerns. 2 days later, our employment records were flagged for procedural violations. Most of us were offered transfers or severance packages. "This is outrageous." Marshall interjected. "Unfounded accusations, Miss Marshall," Judge Winters said firmly. "I suggest you allow the witness to finish." Tanya continued, describing how Ben's room had been immediately sealed, how his personal effects had been inventoried by fund security rather than hospital staff, how the timeline of his death had been altered in official records. By the time she finished, even Marshall's composure had cracked. Judge Winters called a brief recess, returning 30 minutes later with her decision. "What happened here," she began, "represents a profound breach of trust, medical, legal, and ethical. While I cannot yet determine the full extent of wrongdoing, the evidence presented today warrants immediate action." She ordered Claire's reinstatement into treatment under court-monitored supervision. The fund was required to provide complete documentation of all protocols, especially Phase 3. An independent medical review board would oversee Claire's care. "Additionally," she concluded, "I am ordering a full investigation into the circumstances surrounding Benjamin Parker's death. Miss Williams, you'll be granted whistleblower protection." As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mixture of victory and grief. The truth was coming to light, but it couldn't bring Ben back. Outside, Sophie hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for fighting for her when you didn't have to." I hugged her back, realizing that in this moment, the walls between us, between Ben's two worlds, had finally crumbled. 3 months passed. Spring turned to summer, bringing with it a gradual return to something resembling normalcy. Though nothing would ever be truly normal again, the investigation into Westlake expanded beyond Claire's case. Other families came forward, each with similar stories of coercion and secrecy. Phase 3, it turned out, involved genetic modifications that went far beyond treatment. Enhancements designed to create children with heightened immune responses that could be replicated for military applications. Ben's death was officially reclassified as under investigation. The hospital administration was overhauled, with several key figures resigning amid allegations of collusion with the fund. I returned to teaching, finding solace in the routine of my classroom. My fourth graders knew only that Mrs. Parker had lost her husband and had been helping a sick little girl. Their simple compassion, handmade cards, and extra hugs healed parts of me I hadn't known were broken. In June, I published a piece in the local paper titled "The Secrets My Husband Died With and Why I Forgive Him." I wrote about Ben's impossible choices, about the moral complexities of desperate love, about how good people can make terrible decisions for the right reasons. "I cannot condone what Ben did," I wrote, "the deception, the forgery. But I understand why he did it. He saw a child suffering and chose action over inaction, even at great personal cost. In the end, he tried to make it right. That, I believe, is what defines us. Not our mistakes, but our attempts to correct them." The article was picked up by national media. Other whistleblowers contacted Travis, sharing similar stories from different medical research facilities. What had begun as one family's nightmare was exposing a pattern that stretched across the country. Sophie brought Claire to visit me one sunny afternoon. I had been hesitant about meeting her, this child who had been the center of so much pain and secrecy. But when she bounded up my front steps, a drawing clutched in her hand, all reservations vanished. "This is for you," she said, handing me the paper. "Mom says you helped make the bad doctors go away." The drawing showed 3 stick figures inside a heart. They were labeled Mom, me, and Miss Emma. "It's beautiful," I said, kneeling to her level. "Thank you, Claire." She had Ben's smile, his curious eyes, but she was entirely her own person, vibrant, resilient, untouched by the adult battles that had raged around her. As Claire explored my backyard, Sophie and I sat on the porch steps. "The new treatment protocol is working," she said. "No more secret injections or unexplained procedures. Just straightforward medicine. Fully documented." "Good," said. "That's good." She looked at me sideways. "You didn't have to help us. After what Ben did, lying to you all those years, you could have walked away." "I thought about it," I admitted, "for about 5 seconds." "What changed your mind?" I watched Claire as she discovered a butterfly in my garden, her face lighting up with wonder. At first, I was helping Ben, finishing what he started. Now, I gestured toward Claire. Now I'm helping her. Sophie nodded, understanding. She asks about him sometimes. I tell her that her dad was brave, that he loved her very much. "He did," I said softly, "in his way." Rita's investigative series on Westlake went viral, leading to congressional hearings on unethical medical research practices. Families across the country began scrutinizing the fine print of clinical trials their children were enrolled in. Tanya received offers to return to her nursing position, but declined. "Some bridges can't be unburned," she told me when we met for coffee. "But I don't regret speaking up. Even though it cost you your career." She smiled. It gave me something better. Peace of mind. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Ben would be proud of what you've done." 1 year after Ben's death, I finally removed my wedding ring. It caught the light as I slipped it off, the gold band that had represented promises kept and broken. I placed it in a small wooden box along with Ben's last letter. "Goodbye doesn't mean forgetting," I whispered to the empty room. I joined a local advocacy group for medical transparency and patient rights, using my experience to help other families navigate the complex world of clinical trials and experimental treatments. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it had purpose, meaning. On the anniversary of Ben's death, I visited his grave alone. The headstone was simple, just his name and dates. Nothing about the complicated man he had been, the loving husband, the secret father, the reluctant conspirator, the final whistleblower. I placed fresh flowers against the stone, then sat on the grass beside it. "I found the truth, Ben," I said to the quiet cemetery. "And I still love you. But now." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past year lifting slightly. Now I get to breathe again. As I walked back to my car, I thought about the many versions of truth I had discovered since that day in the hospital corridor. The truth about Ben, about Claire, about what people will do, good and bad, in the name of love and survival. He died with secrets, but he also died trying to fix them. And in the wreckage he left behind, I found the strength to begin again. What would you do if the truth about someone you loved was hidden behind a wall of whispers? Could you find the courage to tear it down?